Welcome to Writing and Revising Your Paper, the fifth of 5 videos in the series Writing Graduate Research Papers, an original creation of the Academic Support and Access Center's Writing Lab at American University. My name is Jordan Grant. This series is designed to help students through the entire process of writing a graduate research paper. In this video, you will learn how to start writing your paper as early as possible and how to keep writing consistently. You will also learn the difference between revising and editing, as well as techniques for revising and editing your paper. Step 1. Start writing as early as possible. In the end, no matter how much research and planning you've done, there will come a day when you will be faced with the task of actually writing your paper. And writing is hard. Most people will do everything they can to avoid it. This is one reason why, in the first video in this series, I recommended that you allot more than half of your project time to the task of writing and revising your paper. Starting to write earlier, before you feel 100% ready, keeps you from wasting time on extraneous planning and research. But starting to write early has other benefits as well. Perhaps most importantly, it lets you enjoy the benefits of scale. Doing some back-of-the-napkin calculations, I found that if you want to write a 20-page paper formatted in 12-point Times New Roman font and double-spaced, it comes to about 5,500 words. 6,500 if you include footnotes. Each page is approximately 300 words long. What that means is that if you can give yourself 20 days to write your paper, you can finish it writing just 300 words a day. Even if you reduce the time to 2 weeks, 14 days, you can still finish your paper on time while writing less than 500 words a day. There are 2 techniques I know that might help you start writing earlier. This is the first. Embrace the concept of a zero draft. If you're familiar with first drafts or rough drafts, think of the zero draft as a cut below them. A zero draft is your first, very crude attempt to capture your argument on the page. In her book, Bird by Bird, the writer Anne Lamott famously called these child drafts, shitty first drafts, and down drafts, as in just get it down on paper. A zero draft lets you bring some of the freewheeling energy of brainstorming to the task of writing. When you write a zero draft, rather than laboring over each sentence, you give yourself permission to just write, filling the page with whatever you think belongs, and only checking back occasionally on your outline and notes. Zero drafts are an essential part of writing because they release you from the burden of perfection and give you permission to, you guessed it, start writing earlier. You'll discover that it's exponentially easier to write a good draft of a section after you've blazed a trail for yourself with a zero draft. A second technique that will help you start writing sooner is this. Skip the introduction. Yes, the introduction is a very important part of a graduate research paper, but paradoxically, that usually means it's best to save it for last. This is because the introductions of graduate research papers, just like the introductions of most academic articles, are tell-all introductions. In them, in the space of 2 or 3 pages, the writer explains the question they are trying to answer and then walks readers through his or her entire argument. Ideally, someone should be able to read your intro and create an accurate outline for your entire paper. Knowing this, it doesn't make sense to write the introduction first. If you've been following the steps laid out in this video series, you already have an outline for your paper. Besides, if your argument changes in any way through the process of writing and revising your paper, and it most definitely will, you'll have to rewrite the introduction anyway. So skip it and start writing earlier by diving into another, less important part of your paper. Step 2. Keep writing consistently. Once you've convinced yourself to start writing, you'll have to find ways to keep writing. Over the years, I found 2 techniques particularly effective. The first is to adopt a regular writing routine. Over the past 30 years, several studies have tried to explain why some academic writers are more productive than others. Most of these studies measured both the writer's output, how many words they produced, as well as their generation of creative ideas, the quality and originality of the words they produced. Across the board, these studies confirmed what many people already suspected. Writers who adopted a consistent writing routine, doing some amount of work every day, were more efficient and productive than their peers. People who wrote consistently, regardless of how they felt, produced more work and better work than people who waited for inspiration to strike. They even performed better than people who were punished for not writing. What this means for you, a graduate student, is that adopting a daily writing schedule will help you complete your paper in a timely fashion. The easiest way to make daily writing a reality is to begin tracking your writing every day on a spreadsheet. It gets harder and harder to skip working on your paper when you know you'll have to add a big, disappointing 0 to the word count column. If you'd like to take this process to the next level, you should partner with a fellow writer and commit to sharing your daily or weekly results with each other. Knowing that someone else is monitoring your progress does wonders for your productivity. A second technique that will help you write consistently is breaking down your writing time into small, manageable blocks. This is often referred to as the Pomodoro technique, and in its most common form, it requires breaking down your work into a series of 25-minute intervals, each followed by a 5-minute break. Breaking your writing time into short blocks makes sitting down to write every day seem less daunting. It's only 25 minutes after all, and it also protects you from burnout, which can happen very easily if you spend more than an hour staring at a screen on your desk. Step 3. Understand the difference between revising and editing. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Sitting down to write your paper isn't easy, and if you've gone far enough to finish a draft, you should take a moment to celebrate. Perhaps you should pause this video and treat yourself to a cupcake. When the cupcake is gone, it will be time to start revising your draft. Revision is one of the most important parts of writing, because it's very rare that a writer, at any level, can produce something truly great on her or his first try. Revision is where a research paper takes on a definite shape and becomes something that you will be proud to share with other experts. As I've said before, definitions matter, and it's not helpful that the term revision can mean many different things in the English language. In this video, I would like to set up a rigid distinction between two words that are often thought to be synonymous: revising and editing. When I talk about revising a paper, I'm talking about improving your paper by addressing higher order concerns. What are higher order concerns, you may ask? Higher order concerns are major aspects of your paper like organization, audience, evidence, and what many people call flow. These issues can be contrasted with concerns on the lower end of the spectrum, which are often called lower order concerns. Lower order concerns are issues like grammar, style, spelling, punctuation, and presentation. When I talk about editing a paper, I'm talking about improving the paper in a way that addresses these lower order concerns. To sum this up, revising addresses higher order concerns like organization, audience, evidence, and flow, while editing addresses lower order concerns like grammar, style, spelling, punctuation, and presentation. You'll need to address both higher and lower order concerns as you move from a first draft to a final draft, but it can be dangerous to mix the two together. Why? The time that you spend revising your paper, addressing higher order concerns, will improve it much more dramatically than if you spend the same time editing. Step 4. Revise your draft. Although many techniques can help you focus on revising rather than editing, I have found that one technique works better than almost anything else, and that is the practice of making a reverse outline. Traditionally, outlines are made before a paper is written. As I've talked about in earlier videos, outlines are a useful roadmap for your paper. A reverse outline, as the name implies, flips this process on its head. With a reverse outline, you start with a draft of a paper, and then you simplify that draft into what's often called a sentence outline, where one sentence represents each paragraph in the draft. This is the process. As a writer, you reread a paragraph from your draft, and once you're done, you ask yourself this question: what will my reader learn from this paragraph? Then, you write down your answer to the question on your outline. You should aim for one complete sentence per paragraph, and you should try to make it a declarative sentence. In other words, it shouldn't be a question. This may take a while, but what you'll end up creating is a bird's eye view of your entire paper, a 1 or 2 page document that captures everything your paper says over the course of 20 or 30 pages. This process is useful in many ways. First, by reducing your paper down to a manageable size, the reverse outline makes it much easier for you to check the overall logic and organization of your argument. With a reverse outline, you can easily spot places where you repeat yourself, or places where you need to remind your reader why a particular piece of evidence matters. You'll be able to quickly spot any gaps or any dramatic changes in the tone of your writing. Second, making a reverse outline, forcing yourself to distill every paragraph down to a single sentence, will reveal which of your paragraphs don't have a clear message or have several different messages crammed together. Most high-level academic writing follows the rule that each paragraph conveys one major idea. Your reverse outline will show you whether you fulfilled this standard or not. You'll quickly discover that making a reverse outline is harder than it looks. Most students, when they start creating an outline, are tempted to put in placeholders. What I mean is that instead of writing a full sentence for each paragraph, they'll just say something general. For example, instead of writing down, J.J. Abrams' directing style is heavily influenced by Steven Spielberg, as shown by his expert use of a moving camera, they'll write, Spielberg influences. Other students fall into the trap of writing questions instead of declarative sentences. They'll write, what influenced J.J. Abrams' directing style, instead of the answer to the question, which is what the paragraph is ultimately about. Still, other students make the mistake of writing their summary sentences without actually rereading the original paragraph. They would produce something along the lines of, J.J. Abrams was heavily influenced by directors like Steven Spielberg and Alfred Hitchcock, for a paragraph that doesn't actually mention Hitchcock at all. These students end up creating an imaginary reverse outline, one that represents what they think they say in their paper, but is in reality very different from their actual draft. In most cases, you can avoid all of these problems if you create a reverse outline with the help of a peer or a writing tutor. Having an actual person there to check your work keeps you honest. You can't get away with any placeholders, questions, or imaginary sentences when someone else is reading the paper with you. Once you've gone through the process of making a reverse outline and addressing the higher order concerns of your paper, you'll be ready to move on to the next, final stage of writing a graduate research paper. Step 5. Edit your revised draft. Editing is all about addressing lower order concerns. While these concerns might be lower than the ones previously discussed, fixing them is still an incredibly important part of writing a great paper. If you can imagine your paper as a journey for your reader, a car ride from one place to the next, then lower order concerns are something like speed bumps. If there's just a few speed bumps on the road, a misspelled word here, a difficult to understand passage there, the reader will barely notice the bumps. However, if there are a lot of speed bumps, the reader has to keep mentally slowing down, and they might just decide the trip isn't worth it and go home. Editing is all about removing these speed bumps, making sure that reading your paper is like driving down a highway. To edit, you need to see your paper with fresh eyes, finding ways to notice mistakes in grammar, style, punctuation, and presentation that are hiding in your draft. The easiest technique for most students is to read their paper out loud. Vocalizing the words you've put down on the page activates a different part of your brain, and so it helps many people spot mistakes that were previously invisible to them. However, I found that most people still miss a significant number of mistakes with this technique, so I like to add another twist to it. Read the paper aloud, backwards. In other words, start editing with the first sentence of the last paragraph of your draft. When you've checked the last paragraph, move up to the second to the last paragraph. Continue reading this way until you reach the very first paragraph of your paper. Moving backwards through your paper reduces the risk that your unconscious mind will overlook or ignore mistakes. Many students wonder what they should be looking for as they read their papers out loud. Once you've fixed obvious problems like misspelled words and grammatical mistakes, what's next? For a graduate research paper, you should be spending a sizable amount of time trying to improve your paper's style. To start, you should work to eliminate the passive voice. In a passive voice sentence, the subject is acted upon. The man was hit by the car. This contrasts with the active voice, where the subject does the action. The car hit the man. The major problem with passive voice sentences is that they make it harder to understand causation. Readers have trouble understanding who is responsible for what happened. In other words, saying the man was hit by the car implies, if ever so subtly, that the man was responsible for being hit. Saying the car hit the man implies the car, or really its driver, was responsible for the event. Furthermore, if a sentence is written in an extreme version of the passive voice, the man was hit, it can totally obscure the doer of the action and leave readers even more confused. The easiest way for students to test whether they're using the active or passive voice is to try adding a phrase like by zombies to the end of their sentence. If you can write the man was hit by zombies and the sentence still makes sense, then you've fallen into the passive voice. By shifting your sentences into the active voice, you can make it clear to your readers who is doing what and, in the process, make your paper much more enjoyable to read. There are many other stylistic mistakes you should try to address as you edit your paper. One that I see many graduate students falling into is the curse of the overly long subject. Take a moment and compare these two sentences. The freshman student's overwhelming emphasis on the subjects of her sentence, along with her noticeable reliance on passive voice constructions, weakened her paper. The freshman students weakened her paper by overemphasizing the subjects of her sentences and relying on passive voice constructions. Both of these sentences are written in the active voice, but the reason why most people prefer the second sentence is that the sentence's predicate, its verb, appears much earlier than it does in the first sentence. Weakened is the 20th verb in the first sentence. It's the 4th word in the second. Most readers, especially English readers, are subconsciously waiting for the verb as they read a sentence. A very long subject frustrates them because they have to work harder to hold all the different parts of the sentence in their mind as they read. If you're struggling to edit your own work, don't be afraid to make an appointment at the university's writing lab, to meet with a tutor, or to schedule time to trade and edit drafts with a peer. Editing always works best with a friend, and another person will help you identify patterns of mistakes that you will otherwise miss. Thank you for watching Writing and Revising a Paper, the 5th video in the series Writing Graduate Research Papers. If you found the video helpful, be sure to check out our other videos, which are available through the Academic Support and Access Center's website. This video is protected by a Creative Commons license.